Hi. I just want to take a deep breath here as I get started. Because I'm going to be talking about some deep topics, and I hope that I can catch the flow. I've been in flow this morning. It's funny how doing something that I don't necessarily want to do creates a spark of motion towards the things that I do want to do. And what I'm meaning by that is I've been writing a research paper and I don't really want to do it. Hi, Tim. Nice seeing you again. And writing that research paper, not wanting to do it, is now sparking my passions and purpose into place. And that is what is bringing me to you now on this live. If you are catching this on the replay, then please feel free to comment. In the comments, you are an essential part of this conversation, whether you're here live or not. If you can comment replay just so that I know that you're in the room, that would be great. Hi, John. Okay, I'm going to try to use some visuals today because I'm quite a visual person and this process is quite a visual process. So to really showcase what it is, the concepts that I'm talking about in integrative energetics embodied, which the three foundations are going to be anchor, container, and tornado. Hi, Carolyn. So I want to showcase what those three foundations look like visually, because when applying the energy work, you are using your third eye, your imagination, even though it's very real, to create those visuals, to create the energetics, the spin, the containment, the anchoring in. So this is what this looks like. So this is going to be a container. Imagine that you are somewhere in here, right? This container is like a safe space. But with the energetics in play, it's actually, if you're familiar, it's really, hi, Sophie. Our conversation earlier has inspired me to make this. So this container here is really like when it's in motion, essentially it's a Merkaba. So what integrative energetics embodied is showing and teaching people how to create a Merkaba to be in motion. So this is the container. This is going to be the anchor, right? This is going to anchor you in. And then this is like the tornado. But the thing about, hi Dave and Steven, the thing about the tornado is that the tornado goes both ways. Right, there's always like these equal and opposite parts. What I realized, just as like a side note, that this process, and I'm not drawing it all out, actually lives and resides on the flower of life. And so the flower of life is creation itself. And so this process that I'm teaching is for creation and how to move yourself into new paradigms, how to move yourself into new timelines, how to go through the integration process that's required for all of that motion to be in place and to take place. So what I'm saying here with this tornado is this is like, okay, you're calling something in. Let's say that you're calling in a new way of being, or as it relates to a timeline, you're calling into being a new life, right, for yourself, which could very much so be, I'm going to give you my example right now. My example right now is that I am making a really big shift into moving to relocate into a new place, right? This is actually creating opportunity for me to make movement onto a new timeline. However, I'm already on that timeline because I already have been calling this timeline in. This is a part of me being on this new timeline. Beside the point, when you make really huge shifts in your life, you have opportunities for moving into a new timeline. But in order to do that, you have to have the drain, which is the tornado on the equal opposite side. That drain is going to allow you to let go. Allow you to let go of the new or the old life Allow you to let go of everything that existed on that timeline, both past timeline, tornado timeline. Yes. It's the spin into a new timeline and the letting go of an old timeline. So it's not just the letting go when you're doing this drain process, this letting go of a previous and past timeline. You're also letting go of everything that would have been created by that timeline. That is the grieving process that is necessary, which is also a necessary part and component of integration. So let me show you what this looks like on a timeline. Okay. So this right here is going to be a timeline, right? Let's say this is the timeline that you might be on. So as you're on this timeline, what happens is to move into a new timeline. If you see these arrows, this is you in your Merkaba in motion. This is your safe space to move from one timeline into another timeline. And what I mean by safe space is also when we shift and we move into timelines, you want to keep yourself in wholeness. You don't want that motion. You don't want to be fragmented off. What I mean by that is that jumping timelines, you can leave parts of yourself behind on an old timeline. This is where it's like, oh, I've decided to make a new life change and transition, but you feel this yearning and nostalgia for this past life over and over and over again. It might be that a part of you is still remaining on an old timeline. So this container is what allows you to keep yourself entirely in wholeness so that all of you can move from one timeline into the other timeline. It's essential for me. I call that continuum hopping. Yay! So it's essential for me to always strive towards wholeness, keeping all of my energy in this contained space. That means keeping all of me in the time and space in which my body is existing. So for example, one of my mantras, and it's a daily mantra for me in my daily ritual, is I go where my body goes. I go where my body goes, my field. Why can I not remember this right now? I say it every day. It's because I'm on live. Where my body goes, I go. Where I go, my field goes. As in, where my body goes, my energetic field is also going to go. Keeping yourself in a container of wholeness, like what would it look like if you didn't do that and you had a timeline hop? Well, it would look like you're on multiple timelines. For example, I've had this happen to me before when I left a 10-year relationship. And what happened was I would continue to have dreams that on this other timeline. And I knew that I hadn't completely completed my healing process to maintain all of my wholeness while I moved into a new timeline. And I had to then pull all of the parts and pieces of myself from the previous timeline into the current timeline that I was actually living and existing. This is my point about containment, why it's so essential. You don't really want to be having dreams about another timeline with a past partner. It was happening to me, several times a week, for example. It doesn't allow you to fully anchor in, which this is the anchoring cord, right? Anchor into the current timeline. So the old timeline, you're moving yourself from this up into this new timeline. Wherever your anchoring cord is, this is like where you are, like where you are present. Are you present to that current time and space? And that's why that anchoring cord is so essential. Now the tornado creates the motion, but the pathway is actually the anchoring cord. And I hope that is making sense. Let's see what Stacy is saying. I totally relate to that. Remember the story about my brother? I think part of me is left there because I haven't wanted to let go of that old relationship, so the grief persists. That is exactly correct, Stacy, and that is a really, really excellent example. and I'm sure you already know, that's the integration process. That's the integration process. And sometimes the integration process can take longer than the time and space in which we are existing. And so for me, what that means is activating, calling in the letting go when you're ready, calling in the process of letting go is actually to call yourself into this new way of being. And that is also to say that the tornado is also going the other way, which is the drain, which is the release, which is where all of the grieving takes place. In totality, the tornado going both directions is actually integration. It is the integration process, because integration is going to be all of what is needing to be released. For example, old paradigms, old programmings, belief systems, old ways of being, right? Like you have to go through a process of letting go of all that simultaneously as you are also calling in the new way of being, the new belief systems that will support you, the higher purpose of the current timeline. And this, and also in that totality, is the co-creation process. So let me look at some of my notes here to see what else I had written down. So this, what I'm describing, is actual embodied time travel. We have multiple timelines that can exist, some that are more energetically heavy. What I mean by that is that when something is more energetically heavy, there's more of a possibility and a potential for its existence. And so we have multiple lines like this, right? Like let's say that there are others. Like let's say that there are other timelines, right? There are other options that we can choose in our co-creative process where we want to go. And they're existing, but some of them are just like, it's almost like the lines are thicker, right? Like these are more likely to happen based on your consciousness and where you are directing it and where it is in the present moment. And these things change and shift as you change and shift. Like let's say that you had an old way of being and your consciousness is now supporting this timeline because your choosing looks differently, because you no longer have old belief systems, right? They wouldn't match this other timeline, but they do. These new ways of being and consciousness do heavily match this timeline. Let me see what Stacey has been saying. Dude, I'm only now finally integrating the final steps. It's been a 15-year process. I think it could be much shorter, but I didn't know what I was getting into. So there was much figuring it out as I've been going along. That was like a huge change in your family system, Stacey, with what was going on with your brother. And I mean, it's like he became a whole, almost other person himself, which is a huge timeline change, right? He could have left this world, and instead he, with your support, chose to remain here on another timeline. There's connections that we have to our family that also interconnects to our timelines, because we are sovereign and we are one, but we're also a conglomerate. So families have shared timelines, which is a point that I actually wanted to move into. But what I'm saying is that there's all these multiple factors, right? That when I was saying there are these different timelines and they are more energetically heavy or not, those one of those factors is going to be family and those around us, right? That 15-year process, or however long it's taking you, and I know that some integration processes are much shorter than others. That was a huge, huge change for you and for your family system. huge. And so it makes sense to me that pulling it all into this current timeline with all of the grieving that the bigger the grieving process, the longer it may take to really move. And so I'm just holding space for you and having compassion and also admiration for you and everything that you have done and you do in order to create that motion and momentum. Side note, that has something to do with the artwork in your house. I think you'll know my point, and if you don't, message me. So like the grieving process has to do with the art in the house. So the point that I want to make, which Stacy is really supporting here relative to family, is that families have shared timelines. That's what a bloodline is, right? So you're like, I'm working out this shit from my ancestry, right? Like my parents and all of these people before them were existing on this particular wave of consciousness that was the bloodline that you are currently on relative to like those belief systems, those things that you have inherited ancestrally, right? You're existing on this shared timeline, which is bloodline. When we are consciously seeking to heal out these ways of being that have been programmed into our family's bloodline and thus then inherited into our consciousness, we are actually creating this process, this of the letting go of the old ways of being that you have inherited through your bloodline, and then you are calling in a new way of being. So if you imagine this not being an individual timeline, but this actually being an ancestrally held timeline that is a bloodline, you are now changing the entire future that the children and everyone after them, after you, that are coming from your bloodline are going to exist in. They're going to be birthed into a new paradigm because you have shifted your bloodline into a new way of being, which is also to say that you are moving your bloodline into a new timeline, which is huge. It's fucking tremendous. Now, this is why many of us have difficulties when we're doing that conscious work, connecting to our families, because the gap exists. You are now here. You are now on this timeline. Your family may very well be continuing to run on the same bloodline, which is to say they are continuing to run on a similar timeline. This is the distance between your family and you. And this is why it's hard to relate. This is why, like, if they don't have this level of consciousness that exists at this timeline, it's like they can't meet you. They can't understand you. And though you may be able to understand them in a way because, you know, when you've come from somewhere, you can understand it better and you can kind of collect and know what it took for you to go like this and get on the new timeline. Those ways of being are no longer going to be resonant for you. And you may not want to participate in them anymore. And this can also create distance between yourself and your family members. I'm going to look at some of the comments. Hear you about the artwork. Cool. I thought you probably understand what I'm saying. Bloodline to new timeline. Exactly. Girl, we doing it. And then there's the collective. So, right? Individual, family. And then there is a larger collective. Those larger collectives are going to be whole societies, countries, cultures, right? Humanity, like it gets larger and larger and larger. And this is where each individual moving from one timeline or paradigm and then moving into another, when many do this, We're moving collectively from a shared timeline of humanity into a new one. This could be related, people say new earth, for example. What people are talking about is they are climbing a ladder. They are actually through their own healing process, integration, and embodiment, because you have to go through the entire integration process, become embodied to actually live embodied and be fully a conglomerate in wholeness on a new timeline. As many people do this as a collective, we are moving and shifting into what people would consider new earth. And when people say, that have this, they're like, I think new earth exists simultaneously in a way with old earth. That is true. This is old earth. People can still live and reside here, right? And being in an old way, an old paradigm, which could be considered old earth, as others have shifted and have moved into new earth. As this happens, more and more rise as a collective, this line, this pathway becomes more energetically heavy. As this becomes more energetically heavy, so does this shared collective timeline, which means it's more of a possibility, it's more of a potential. That's how we shift humanity. This is potent fucking shit, y'all. This is transformation. This is co-creation. This is healing. This is integration. This is embodiment. This is putting yourself into motion. This is calling in the wisdoms of new timelines and new paradigms, moving yourself to be more proximal to what this is. And this is where we want to live, and this is where we want to reside as a collective, as individuals. And integrative energetics embodied helps you do this. Hi, I love you too, Frank. I am offering a Merkaba to jump timelines. I am offering a space to do soul retrieval. I am offering the skills to have the tornado be pulling in your longing and letting go of the old. This is what I'm offering for $250, y'all. Holy shit. Like, this is real shit. This is powerful. This is potent. This is becoming your highest. This is pulling in through this tornado your blueprint, your higher purpose, a higher purpose of the collective of humanity. And I am showcasing and teaching the energetics that are involved in creating all of this. And I am also not just leaving it to energetics. That is hugely important. What I'm saying with that is that there are plenty of healers that will go in and they will help you shift your energetic field, and then you are on your own. For one, you don't know how they did that. They did it for you. I am offering the skills for you to do that for yourself, to keep this skill with you as you move into new timelines and as you move in your progression, as you move through your lifetime. And I am not just offering the energetics in order to do that. I am offering the skills for integration to actually create the embodiment. So when a healer does the energetic process for you and they send you on your way, they're not telling you how to be with your integration process. If you cannot be with your integration process, you cannot come into embodiment. If you do not come into embodiment, there is no change. That is what I'm fucking offering. That is real shit. It's awesome. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate it so much. I'm so happy to be here speaking about this passionately because I know the value of all of this. I know how potent it is. I use this all the time. And I, though I know the value of it, sharing it with others so that they may know it, it's such a process. You really have to gain the skills. You have to put it into practice. You have to implement it to actually see how potent it truly is through your own lived experience. So I can talk about this all day long, but it's going deeper. It's learning all of this process, being with it and becoming it, and then becoming an entirely new you in the way that you are and the way that you exist, changing the bloodline, changing the direction of humanity, adding to the collective highest good. Yes, thank you. You are what you speak. So strong. Thank you. That is embodiment. You are what you speak. I am an embodiment of this process, and I wish to offer it to anyone who is interested. So if you're interested, I have a workshop that is starting on June 1st. It's $250. I said this in my previous video. $250 is not even close to the value of this modality. Not even close. The reason why it's $250 is because that's what my nervous system would allow me to price it at. And it will never, ever be less than $250. So this is a great time to join me for this workshop. If you're interested, feel free to private message me. I would love to have you. I'm so passionate about this, and I'm so ready to kick off this workshop, and I'm so ready for others to join me in this process, because this is coming through my blueprint. Even though it is a co-creation process with the universe, again, I discovered that this process, I didn't draw it all out, is actually replicating the flower of life. It is also offering a Merkaba for travel. I had no idea that this is all of what I was creating as I was doing it. These are things that I've been discovering as I go along my process, and I would love to offer others this process so that we as a collective, we can move into new shared timelines in which I exist or also want to exist, that I wish to create with all of you. Thank you so much for joining me today. So much. Hi, Ricardo and Ed. If you are catching this on the replay, again, feel free to comment. You are an essential part of this conversation. I would love to have you here. And if for anyone, again, who is interested in the workshop, feel free to PM me. I would love to have you. Have a wonderful and beautiful day. It's time to get back to writing my research paper. Love you all.